Well, I guess I would say, thank you all for coming this morning. I know there are a lot of things going on, not least of which our own president is speaking right now. So thank you for taking the time to come this morning to listen to our briefing today with Assistant Secretary Robinson, who is our Assistant Secretary for Conflict and Stabilization Operations, which is a pretty broad bureau that deals with a lot of issues related to conflict zones around the world. And he himself has had a lot of experience working in conflict zones from El Salvador to Afghanistan and a few places in between. So I'll hand it over to him, and I think he'll start by talking a little bit about his office and what it does.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for you guys being here. Also, I recognize the president is speaking, so I understand I'm the B card on this one. Yeah, CSO, it's kind of interesting because, the idea in the State Department is that we deal with conflict all the time. That's what diplomats do. We try to resolve conflict. We try to avoid conflict. That's our business. So some years ago, the State Department created the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. Our job is to look at conflict itself. It's not to look at all of the other issues that pertain to conflict. We're not human rights people. We're not as concerned about trafficking in persons and that kind of stuff. We try to understand the dynamics of the conflict itself and to give our diplomats, our ambassadors and country teams, the tools that they can use to resolve the conflict, or at least respond to the conflict, not necessarily fix it, but respond to it. And so what we do is we try again to look at the very issues that are breeding difficulty wherever we are. And so it's a bit different. It's a bit like being a pathologist for medicine. And seriously, I mean, you go to your GP and he says, well, you look kind of funny today. You're a bit off. We're looking at the slide, and we're saying, look, this is what's happening. And if it's not addressed, it will go this way. And so we recommend that you address it in some fashion or another. Thank you. And that's our job, is to look at the conflict issues themselves. Now, conflict is a huge issue, obviously, or a huge area. It can be the fight you have with your spouse, or it can be, the World War III. So we focus on three things, primarily. We focus on atrocities against civilians. We focus on violent extremism, and we focus on the kinds of issues that erupt around transition. So, for instance, it would be elections in Kenya, for example. And we try to make sure that we are responding to those kinds of violent scenarios that will help us to ensure that elections or other transition areas work well. So that's what the Bureau does. We're fairly small, but we have a lot of tentacles into places that we work in. So I'm very happy to take your questions and have a discussion. Fire away. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by, I never heard the distinction, I mean, sort of as a separate category, conflict that's based in transition. I think that's so fascinating because, it's sort of part of the basic human wiring, which makes change difficult at opportunity, but at the same time, possibly, it fragments what was, and therefore people jump to fear. So I was wondering if you could talk about sort of these, in an abstract way, the connection between transition and conflict, and why those two seem to be such twins often.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think that we want to support democracy. Obviously, want to support elections and those types of things. But often, what we celebrate in stable democracies is an opportunity for disaster in other places, and so we try to understand the dynamics, the forces that are at work in those places, and you know, create opportunities for people to have dialogue and mediation, you know, around these transitional moments. The transition is always, in a sense, it's always, without overstating it, it's always dangerous. I mean, we're not sure what the outcome will be. We want to make sure the outcome is stable. And so our job is to try to work on the issues that may make these transitional moments less stable. That's very
You mean to try to ensure
Obtuse.
continuity of parts that can stay the same?
no. What we're concerned about is, you know, when violence becomes destabilizing, when violence can actually interrupt an election cycle or something else. And so it's not to stay the same, it's to make sure that the outcome reflects what the people want. And our job in CSO is very kind of small in the sense that we are concerned not so much about the things that other parts of the State Department look at. We're concerned, like, you know, human rights and the other things, we're concerned about that, of course, but we try to make sure that the violence that may occur is not going to destabilize the elections, that the elections can go forward. That's what we care about. So,
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense to
I'm
you.
gonna take the moderator's prerogative and say, could you give a specific programmatic example so that we could see, oh, this is something that might directly relate to that sort of violence prevention?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about countries specifically at this point. That's the job of my colleagues who are the regional assistant secretaries. But you can certainly look at places around the world and in regions, Central America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and other places, in which there has been an absence of mediation, an absence of the ability to talk to each other. And we try to create that. We try to help people do that. So we're in Kenya, for instance, now, because the elections are very important. And Kenya is, of course, a proud democracy, and we want to work with them to make sure that the elections that are coming up will, in fact, come off. You can look at Central America, the same thing. So we are working in places in which violence can, in fact, disrupt the will of the people. And that's our goal.
In Africa, there's been a lot of, Abdullahi Shuaibu, Pan-African News Agency, there's been a lot of conflicts. So I don't know what specific programs you've evolved in order to resolve these issues. Like there's one you call the Northern Dialogue Peace Process in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I don't know what is that.
Well, what we're doing is we're funding, my bureau is funding an effort to bring the governors and others in northern Nigeria together to discuss ways in which they can resolve the kinds of issues or work on the kinds of issues that Boko Haram and other groups are taking advantage of.
Okay.
So we're creating an atmosphere, we're creating a platform for people to speak and to put their issues on the table.
Okay.
And we will do that in the coming months.
So that's the Northern Dialogue process.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the governors, right, dialogue, right. Yeah, our goal is, again, quite frankly, it's to not empower, that's a bad word to use, but it's to help people at the most local level respond to issues. And so we're working with governors as opposed, and we also work with, obviously, the national governments.
Okay.
But my job is to work with governors and at the local level to try to make sure that we can find solutions, or if not solutions, at least a way to discuss these issues locally.
So far, how has it been going, the process?
It's great, don't you think? I mean, the
Okay.
world's great. No, it's,
Okay.
no, I'm kidding. It's interesting. It's don't write that down.
We already know that.
No. I think it's kind of fascinating. I think creating, and I don't want to sound like an undergraduate or something, but I think creating the opportunity for people who normally don't sit down at a table to talk to each other is useful. The United States has a unique opportunity to provide that possibility, and we do that wherever we can. To help people come together and discuss their issues. We don't have the answers. I'm not here to say that I'm going to solve the issues in Nigeria or anywhere else. But what we can do is create the space that people can come together to discuss those issues in a useful way. And we also have resources that can help to respond to particular problems that people may address. And those are varied, frankly.
How do you parse the difference or the the possible conflict between being sort of the good faith sort of intermediary or neutral person to try to get people, different stakeholders to get together and talk to each other, when the outcome of negotiations may be perceived as in conflict with U.S. policy goals? I mean, you said at the beginning that avoiding conflict is your business, which is kind of a surprising
Well,
thing to see.
yeah, probably a poor choice of words.
Well, what did you mean, and what about when conflict promotes American interests? Because the outcome would probably favor somebody that the U.S. favors.
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I have a daily struggle with my colleagues on the issue of violence because we're not about preventing violence. Violence happens. That's life. And it goes on. Our interest as part of the State Department is to make sure that U.S. interests are able to proceed properly and that violence does not interrupt that. And that we're
That can actually further the American interest, though.
yeah, we're always well, I'm not going to suggest that we will use violence to further interests, but I do think that we our job is to make sure that we have as many partners as we can to make sure that civilians, particularly, which is my job to look at, are able to live peacefully and not to be attacked and not to have their lives disrupted by that. So, our job is to look at events that may, in fact, target civilians.
Well, I'm thinking, for example, just as an example,
Yeah.
the recent sort of accommodation, if you want to call it that, between FARC and the others, where it's long. I don't know if it's still the case, or until recently was the case, that FARC was somebody that we considered to be sort of an enemy because we were allied with the Colombian government. I'm not,
Right.
of course, in this
No,
way,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying that. In a situation where you want, on the one hand, you want to get these people to talk to each other, but on the other hand, it seems like it would be legitimate and understandable for the United States in a situation like that to have the thumb on the scale a little bit, so that
Sure.
if there was a conflict, you want the conflict to go your way,
in our direction, right?
rather than just sort of splitting the difference between stakeholders and
Yeah,
sort of
you're exactly
the
right.
ethos of
Yeah.
equivalence, which isn't. I mean, so it sort of seems like you wearing two hats. It's difficult to do. I mean, it's sort of built in.
I mentioned that our perspective really looks at violent extremism and atrocities, those two things. And so, in fact, use the example of Colombia. We're deeply engaged in Colombia.
Right.
My bureau is working there. We're trying to help the government of Colombia make sure that we have an early warning system in place to see if the peace agreement begins to fall apart. They can react more quickly to keep it together. we're, you know, our job is to promote diplomacy. Our job, frankly, is to make sure that people don't fight when they don't have to fight, that they have an opportunity to talk. You're right, clearly, that sometimes, violence works, toward a positive outcome. World War II is a great example of that, obviously. But our job is to make sure that, or to try to help diplomats engage others to prevent an outcome that targets civilians, that makes civilians weak, or the victims of violence. So atrocity prevention is a major goal that we play, and as is violent extremist organizations. We try to stop that from happening.
For that.
Yeah, we all are. I mean, it's I get it. I mean, I'm dancing around the issues, of course, but I mean, it's difficult to discuss this because we all try to. It seems to me, we all try to stop bad things from happening. Okay, that's called diplomacy. That's what we do. So how do we do it? And the way we do it is through analysis. My bureau has a bunch of really smart folks, and we work together with other agencies in the government, outside of government, and we try to actually look into the dynamics of what's happening to a place, and to understand, who's doing what to whom, when, where, and why, and to see if there's a way that we can inject some sort of proposal that will stop that from happening, and that's our job. But it's quite difficult, obviously.
Can I ask another question? I mean, I don't want to take.
I will.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I'm just still fascinated by this idea of transition, because I mean, I wonder what other kinds of transitions there are. For example, climate change is a big thing,
Yeah.
and we're beginning to see that
Yeah, you're
coming
right.
home to roost,
Yeah.
and that's another transition that
Yep.
people are going through that creates all kinds of problems in terms of conflict
Yep.
and scarcity, etc.
Yeah, you're right. I
I
mean,
mean, is that part of your brief?
it hasn't been yet, but these are the kinds of issues that we look at. And, how does climate change affect civilian life? I mean, how does it affect people? And is it going to lead to the kind of conflict that will be destabilizing? We look at that stuff. Yeah, that's our job. I don't have an answer.
No, I'm just noticing.
But that's exactly right. So we do look at these kinds of things and say, looking down the road, this issue is going to come up. So how do we help people address this issue in a way that is productive and not violent? So yeah, that's precisely what we're doing.
We are in the middle of a refugee crisis, especially, Europe is struggling right now with refugees coming from Syria and Afghanistan. But what I've been hearing is that Africa is still number one when it comes to refugees. Could you tell us a little bit more about it? If you get some data or information, because I'm sure you're collecting, a lot of.
Yeah, I don't have data, and I know Anne, the Refugee Bureau is here now, and I'm sure that they can give you better
Sure.
information. But yeah, the refugee crisis is huge. The migration crisis is huge, and I think there's an issue there that we have to begin to understand the difference between refugees and migrants. It doesn't mean that we treat them badly or differently, but we have to understand what our response, both legally and in humanitarian terms, ought to be towards both of those. The United States has been the leader, frankly, in refugee issues for many years. Our refugee admissions program is larger than anybody else's, and has been for a very long time. The United States does provide more assistance to UNHCR and ICRC and all of the other humanitarian organizations around the world than anybody else. So we're deeply involved in this issue, and will continue to be. For my bureau, refugees are an outcome of the conflict I'm trying to address.
That's
And so you're looking at the result of our problems, not the cause of our problems.
yeah. It feels like it's really connected, right?
It is connected. Sure, this is what happens.
Prevent
Yeah.
it. People go away.
The thing I wish to address is that so often I think we look for solutions to problems that are programmatic. We try to put a program here, a program there. They're not. The solutions aren't programmatic. The solutions are diplomatic. The solutions are politics. And that's what we try to look at. What are the dynamics that are the power dynamics that are happening? And that's what my bureau tries to understand better. So in the U.S. government, you have OTI, the Office of Transition Initiatives, and USAID. They do programs. They do them very well. We try not to duplicate their efforts. What we're looking at is how an ambassador, particularly, can address this issue. Who we need to touch to help these dynamics move in our direction.
Do you ever use third-party actors?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. Yeah, when we do programs, we do programs. So we use a lot of international organizations to be on the ground to do mediation efforts and other things. Yeah. So we fund those a lot.
You said that it's, I guess, open to definition about what migrants or refugees, but of course refugee is a legal definition of that.
And that's the point I was making.
Whereas migrants, I mean, they could be refugees, but they have to be legally designated
right,
that way
precisely,
after a
right.
process that's legal. I guess it's set forth in the 1951 convention.
Convention, right.
Is the word atrocity
protocol.
also a legal term of art?
It's interesting. It may be. I will express my ignorance here. I don't know if it is or not. And quite frankly, we don't use numbers. X number of people die, therefore it's an atrocity or not. That's not how we do our
It's a
business.
fascinating word.
It is.
What is
Yeah.
that?
No, I know. And I'm not sure that anybody does that.
But you know it when you see it, I guess.
Well, it's like pornography, right? I mean, that's the old thing from the U.S. Supreme Court. You recognize it when you see it. Frankly, I think the realization that we operate from is that conflict is the incubator of atrocities. So if you look at something like the president just mentioned it, or somebody did recently, Srebrenica. The conflict in the Balkans, in Bosnia, is difficult. The fact of Srebrenica and many other cases like Srebrenica, that was only one of many, makes it far more difficult to resolve that conflict because that atrocity occurred. We want to stop that atrocity from occurring. That's our job. You can have conflict, I get it. But within conflict, you should not do these things because it makes it far more difficult to resolve the issue at the end of the day. So in Bosnia, for example, I mean, it is still a place that is going through a certain amount of upheaval. And part of that is that the issues that led to Srebrenica haven't been resolved. We'd like to stop that from happening. Gotcha.
Said much.
Good.
Yeah.
So,
Well, maybe I'll just ask one last question, because I think it goes back to the atrocities versus civilians, and that's sort of an interesting topic, because we don't talk about it a lot. And I wondered if you could maybe give some generic examples of things that you're looking at and or how that intersection is. I mean, obviously Srebrenica is a good example, but maybe some others and how you analyze that data in a way.
Sure. Well, we have we're building with partners a thing called the Resolve Network, which you'll hear about probably here at the General Assembly. And we're trying to research and create a better body of knowledge about why people join violent extremist organizations. And it's really kind of fascinating. I can remember not very long ago when folks who were in, frankly, pretty high positions were saying that, look, the reason for violent extremism, the reason that people join these groups is because they don't have a good education or they lack opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. That does not explain why somebody killed 14 people in California. And that's not the reason that people do this. So our research is trying to find out, what really is happening there. Not so much looking at the psychology of why somebody joins a group, but looking at the way it happens, the network, the sort of the biology of this thing. Why does this happen? What does this person do that is different than everybody else is doing? So if you look at a group of 100 people and you see 3 of them become extremists, what did they do differently than the other 97 people? And looking at that, that's what our job is. And we have a great deal of, a number of folks who are diving into that issue, is to try to figure out the networks that occur.
You mean like the bare bones, like so-and-so made a phone call or so-and-so?
Well, yeah, I don't want to, so the guy started wearing, you saw this on the news today, right?
I haven't seen the news today.
No, somebody suddenly started wearing different clothing and stopped going to this club and went to that club. And you see a pattern that begins to emerge. Travel begins to emerge. And we look at, we're trying to understand.
What's a red flag look like in the city?
Yeah, exactly. So, and we're not trying to understand why you would do something awful. I don't know why. I've raised 2 kids. I don't know why they do what they do. I don't.
Because you said no.
That's good. Yeah, your father, right? But if you can look at this over time, you can see patterns emerging. And so how do you interrupt the pattern? How can you stop the pattern from completing itself?
I don't see how you can do that, though, without psychology. Like, why would somebody say, okay, today's the day I'm going to wear a red sweatshirt?
Yeah.
I mean, for example, or go to that club.
Yeah. No, and we do have folks that are doing that. I mean, at state and elsewhere in the government, there are bureaus and places that are doing precisely that are looking at why people do what they do. That's not my job.
Right,
My job, our bureau, is looking at the networks, the patterns, and trying to figure out, okay, what are we seeing in terms of the taxonomy of this thing?
Yeah.
So it's a bit different. We all bring it all together, hopefully, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
And how do you stop that pattern when you're saying that at one point you might stop it?
Don't know. I mean, it's really fascinating. I don't know the answer to that question. That's the question we're seeking. We're trying to answer. I don't know.
Because that person can always tell you, that's just my choice, or I just changed my lifestyle.
But,
how can you
is there an influential person in that person's life? Is it the mother? Is it the soccer coach? Is it somebody else that we can make aware that if you see this person doing these things, you may want to touch them on the shoulder and say, hey, pal, what are you doing? A way to interrupt this. And we're looking at those things, not so much trying to get inside somebody's head to figure out why they do what they do.
Sounds like fine line,
Oh, it is. Yeah, no, there's no question about it. And so, as I said, I mean, a lot of people looking at different elements of this thing. Our job is sort of the network issue, rather than the individual.
I was growing up in communism, right? So
Where are you from?
From Prague,
Oh, yeah.
Czech Republic. So whenever I hear something like that a bureau or a government or somebody comes to to you and ask, what you do. It's kind of weird what you're doing, or you are out of like mainstream. That's why it's kind of hit close home. So I was just wondering.
So what's
how
your, what is your sense of this?
Well, you said that you might see if 3 people out of 100, behave differently, So I was just wondering how you approach these people, or when you're saying you ask coach or mother or influential people, but so I was just wondering how you do it. You investigate or you conduct interviews or something, because I do remember when. And I don't want to compare these two things, but I do remember when secret police came to my house, right, or to the house of my father, and asking questions about, why I didn't raise when the Soviet flag went up, So I just didn't, because I wasn't like, I don't care.
Well, you took a
But-
different route home.
Yeah, exactly. No. I mean,
Right, yeah,
again,
yeah.
it's a different
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah,
I don't
we're
want to
not-
like compare you to.
No, I get that, yeah. But that-
KGB or anything, No, that wasn't my. I was just wondering how you. It's kind of sensitive, I think, because
It is,
Like,
and frankly, we're at the very beginning of this
personal
stuff.
liberties, and that was just my
No, I appreciate that. yeah.
concern, maybe.
No, we're not, looking at. We're not trying to be the secret police. You described.
No, my.
But we're trying to use big data.
Yeah, I
to
understand,
What,
The
what-
big data, right?
what is
Then
that?
you look at people's websites and where they go.
No, it's not our job. I mean,
No, but I'm just saying, that would be an indicator.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All of a sudden, they switch to those websites.
Yeah, and you go, that's interesting. Yeah.
But it sounds as if your role is more data analysis versus that next step
Yeah.
that you were describing.
No, I understand that these 3 people can be. They can be terrorists or bad people. Back in time, and we were just. Oppressed people. So again, I apologize if I
No,
made
I
bad
appreciate that. Yeah,
comparison.
no, but it is data. You're right. It's data analysis. We're looking at the patterns that emerge and trying to understand how to respond to those better.
So rather than maybe going the next step into touching these other individuals, looking at the data and giving broad sweeping recommendations of these may be patterns to look for.
So this is how you also work, let's say, in Africa or in some conflict-ridden countries.
Yeah,
that you're
what we
looking
try
at
to
patterns?
do is get to the level where things happen as opposed to the national level. We try to get to subnational levels. So my colleagues are able, ourselves, but also with partners in the field, to work in local communities, to try to understand what's really happening in that community, and to give that information, pass that information up, and then to use cross-cutting cases. So we'll see this happening in this community, but we've also seen it in 47 other communities elsewhere, and this is what happens. And so we can give that kind of analysis to our ambassadors and other people, so they're able to go, maybe we ought to do this here. We're not giving solutions. We're trying to help them ask smart questions. If we did this, what would happen?
Visualizing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I call it maps and gaps. I know.
That's good.
Yeah, the idea is that what we want to do in my bureau, the bureau I work in, tries to visualize for people what would take 500 pages of text to understand. It's a map, right? Not necessarily a Rand McNally map, but just a regular map. So we can show actor maps and see who's related to whom and how these things work together. And so I can sit down with you and say, okay, and wherever the places you're interested in, name a country, this is what's happening. This is what it would take a year of reading for you to see. And I now have the time to do this, so I'm showing you what you would see if you had the time to do it. So here's your map. And then on top of the map that we whether it's conflict or rather whether it's a CVE or atrocities, we layer on top of that programs. So we know what the UN is doing, we know what the US is doing, and we put that there, and we can look at the thing and say, that's fascinating that you have programs up here, public violence is down here. Oops, you know, maybe you ought to think about this. And that's the kind of analysis we're trying to do. And it's common. I mean, it's quite useful.
No, it's amazing that you get all these feedback or information, so you know what might be happening inside the society.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't claim that we get the answers. What we're trying to do is get more information to ambassadors and people to think more rationally about the issues that they're facing.
Do you share the data that you collect with local law enforcement and other people?
Yeah, I mean, we work for the ambassador when we go out to a place, so whatever the arrangements are that the embassy has, we share.
I imagine a lot of that would be very useful information.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And again, it's not sneaky stuff, it's just talking to people, it's being around, it's understanding why somebody does what they do, and how these things are occurring. Anyway.
Any last question?
Good.
Well,
But
thank you for coming and
Yeah, thanks, guys.
thanks
you so
for giving us that briefing.
Thank you.
So, where are you from? Again?
Nigeria.